Good afternoon. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for IBC again as we continue this series of different sessions. Our next session we're excited to present is the one book per session. And the book this semester is The NVIDIA Way. Many of you are familiar with OpenAI. So this is more of a book. Well, you know what? I'll let Dr. Kim give a great overview about that. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the sessions. So my name is Sungdu Kim. I'm a professor in the management and marketing at the College of Business and Technologies. So today we're discussing a book titled OpenAI, The Optimist, Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the Race to Invent the Futures. So these days we are all here and talk about AI, how to use AI for work and studies, and how AI affect our job and career. So this session should be interesting. So today we have a 4 student presenter here. So William Gibson, Javier Medina, Veronica Nabor, and Charlie Hoover. So each presenters will have 10 minutes, about 10 minutes, focusing on key topics and themes from the books. So after all presentations, I will open the floor for Q&A. So, all right, let's get started. So our first presenter is Javier. He will talk about Sam Altman's early childhood and formative years. So please join me in welcoming Javier.
Hello? All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. Today, I'm not going to talk about the classic Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. I want to give you something more. I want to give you the knowledge to know who Samuel Altman is, a basic young man from Chicago, from a beautiful city in Chicago. All right, Sam Altman was born here in Chicago on April 22 of 1985 from a Jewish family that came to United States at the early century of 1900 from the Russian Empire, what used to be the Russian Empire. And I want to tell you the background of his family a little bit more. They used to live in St. Louis, Missouri. Jerry's father, which was Jack Altman, the father of Samuel Altman, he was actually a workaholic. They used to work a lot. They had the mentality, the drive to be better when they came to the United States. That was something that Samuel Altman learned at a very early age. So one of the things that he saw St. Louis was the diversification between black community and white community, the idea of the people on St. Louis, how there was so much diversification where white people were moving to the suburbs and the black people were suffering on the downtown of St. Louis. So he saw that and he gave him an idea about what he wanted to do. He wanted to be different. He wanted to help people. He wanted to be somebody who could provide housing for all the community. So that's what he did. He worked in different cities. One of the cities was Chicago, where he moved later on, and he met his future wife, who was going to be. Who was going to be Courtney. So in St. Louis, 1969, his father saw something that was terrible. It was a big thing going on. It was the Mill Creek Valley, what the government called as.
So this is the back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got it. It was the Mill Creek Valley, what they call it, St. Lawrence, where they took all the houses of the black community, what they call cleaning the city, which he ended up taking so many people's houses, and they never renew their houses, end up without homes. Unfortunately, end up homeless. One of the saddest part about that is we still see it right now, even in Chicago. So Jerry joined the government because he wanted to remove that. He also met a beautiful woman, a hardworking lady called Connie Gibson, which she majored in medical school. Actually, she did her hours here in Chicago, Northwestern University, where she focused here in dermatology, so she could have more time with her family later on. So one of the things that got to her a lot was the spread of AIDS, which played a huge role later on when she discovered that her son was gay, because she saw these poor young men getting this terrible disease, and there was nothing she couldn't do about that. So later on, the family, they got married, and they got the Altman's kids, where Samuel Harris, his sibling Matt, Jack, and Sue, her little sister. So after that, they tried to make a balance between family and work. So they did a lot of move, working hard, especially his dad, Jerry. He did a lot of work for the community, helping Harold Washington, the first black mayor in the city of Chicago, which he helped him to get 2 elections. Unfortunately, the moment he passed away on his office. After that, they couldn't be here, and they tried to find better opportunity in Clayton, St. Louis. So they moved to Clayton, Missouri. Connie was back. Connie was back to work right after she gave birth to Annie. We can tell, but just by that, the fact that she was such a workaholic too, and such a good mother, because she was worried about helping the income of the household, while his husband was working so much. Jerry was so focused about helping the community, but he forgot about the fact that he needed to provide for the house. Unfortunately, that's something that happens all the time. He focused also on all his station, nationwide housing, neighborhood development. So they did their best to keep the family together, have a good balance between work, their passions, and raising 4 kids. So after that, Jerry knew, I don't want to be like my dad, a workaholic. So he focused all his attention on getting a job close to his family, which he did. Later on, the year passes by, and Alton was just different. He was just so intelligent. He was such a good kid, but the fact that he was so mature for a kid, he was sad for her mother. He thought she was doing something wrong. But no, he was just too intelligent, too different. So instead of getting a football like a normal kid, I would love to, he got a computer. And look at this massive computer. It's a brick. But that was his son loved it. He used to love it. It was a Mac LC2. Just imagine, how are you happy with this? But he was happy. It was the best gift he could ever have. He learned later on, he learned how to do programming, basic programming, program C++. He was so in love with that. He learned it on the school. He learned it. The teacher were teaching 1 thing, he was learning 5 things. It was incredible how much information he was absorbing like a sponge. It was amazing. He got educated. He educated himself on basic prompt and later C++. The teacher gave him 1 advanced lesson, while he was also helping solve the issue of others to it, even problems that the teachers, they couldn't even solve. Then he got a rough moment where he was deciding, should I study on a public education or should I study on a private education? He wanted to stay in public education because he used to believe, just like his father, that education should be public for everybody. Education should be given, it should be equal, no matter the money that the people own. So, unfortunately, education back in the late 1990s, it wasn't the best. So he has to change to Burke High School, where he fell in love with it. He liked the fact, the safety, the people, they didn't lock the lockers. You cannot do that definitely in Chicago. He was so in love with that. He felt like he was at home. So the years passed by, and He was showing this confidence, this identity. He was showing leadership. That was the moment when he knew how he was growing. The fact that he was not like the other kid. He was standing out where other people were learning about how to do math, to improve, to get a better grade on SAT. No, he was learning computer science by his own, solving the problem of the high school, solving the issue of the library, trying to do something different, trying to do everything that was related to computers, but also at the age of 16, something that hit the family. Also the book emphasized that about when he turned 16, his identity was different. He knew that was the moment to tell her mom that he was gay, that he knew at the early age of 12, which was a difficult situation for Courtney because she didn't want her son to suffer AIDS. She just wanted happiness for his son, and she was worried about his health. So that's what she was worried about. People were so excited about him, about like his identity, about everything. He knew how to like communicate to people. On his senior year, his last year, he has to prove his leadership. That's what he did. He did a convention. He talked to other people in front of so many people. The first time that he was showing leadership, that's what he did. It was incredible, the fact that he was going with confidence. He was going with 30% knowledge, 70% confidence. And that's the way to go, honestly. So he decided, I gotta go to Stanford to complete my dream, to go to my dream university. He went to Stanford on the summer of 2005. It where his ambitions and all the interests about computer were born. That was the moment where he knew that maybe computers are for him. He was deciding, should I do focusing on AI? Should I focus on nuclear energy? Should I focus about education? So he was, one of the funny things about his story, he was that he knew that even if the problems were difficult, he was right. He was always right. So like any normal person, he broke down a computer, broke a computer into pieces to solve the issue, which is a different way to go. I usually turn off the computer, turn it back on, hoping that the error is solved. That was it also. That was later on, he got to know Alok definitely. A person that was a huge role later on for him because he then working with him and Peter, they working on the app Viendo. They knew there was a big business going on with the GPS and location, so he decided, okay, there's opportunity here, but there's a problem. Peter only knew how to do business. He didn't know how to do programming, so it was two people. Alok, the founder, and Sam working on the programming, and he decided, okay, let's do something different with maths. Let's do something that communicate with people, something that get people together. So Sam came up with the idea of a different approach. Let's find friends, let's help people find each other. That was his mentality, especially because after 1999, the Congress forced all the mobile company to have the location on every time there was a 9/11 call. So it was mandatory that they had a location tracking. They come up with the idea, they brainstorm a lot, and then they decided to create Viendo, which means seeing in Spanish. Sam did everything he could. He impressed the story. He impressed everybody on the conventional basis. It was a programming business program at Stanford. He blew it off. He was amazing. He come up with an Apple style. Sam was like, what's the main question when you call somebody? Back in 2005, there was nothing like a share my location. It was, hello, where are you? That was how he come up with the idea of getting all this idea. And the judge, one of the judges was Patrick Chung, which worked a new enterprise associate, and he asked him, do you actually want to do this? Are you sure you want to risk your education for this opportunity? But he didn't, because in reality, for do this, he need to contact with what Singular, it used to be AT&T, Verizon Spring, and he actually, Peter Chung offers him the opportunity to get with the Spring CTO to Sun, with the Chief Technology Officer. But the problem is that Chung could not take Sun if he still was studying. Mind you, he was still a sophomore. He didn't get any PhD. He didn't get even to senior. So he didn't have time to worry about that. So what he did, he worked hard to get all the opportunity. One of the people that offered him the opportunity was Y Competitor. So he took a flight to Boston, first thing in the morning, and went to the Y Combinator Summer Founders Program to have an interview with Paul Graham and Jessica Livington, the owners of this of Y Combinator. So later on, Viendo was a complete success with the Y Combinator. They love Sam. They love his drive, the way he saw. He had a different mentality for business, not only for hacking or coding. He was a businessman from heart. So they accept him, and he got. It wasn't even much money. It was $6,000 for 6% of the company. However, they were gonna provide him with a lot of education, a lot of advice. That's what he needed, especially the connections.
One moment. Yeah, 1 more minute.
Oh, okay. Paul Graham had Jessica Livington. There were people that were excited with doing startups, so they combined. Paul Graham was already a successful man. He knew about startups. Livington, she was his girlfriend, and also was a person that had the drive for startups. So they decided to create their own company about startups because they already had the experience about it. So they come with a simple plan of pretty much consisted of giving small checks but a lot of knowledge to the people, which was fantastic. Later on, Sam discovered that he was the first person to be founded for Y Combinator. Summer of 2005, it was a big thing for Sam. He knew Stanford not for here, not for him. His mind, his brain, his heart wasn't in it. He wanted to be something else. He wanted to do entrepreneurship. He wanted to be the CEO. He wanted to be the owner. He wanted to be the boss of his own company. So that's what he did. He went back to Cambridge, got to a conversation with the CTO of Spring, and worked on all these ways to improve his idea of Viendo, which later on got a different name to Reddit. So it was fantastic. And the only concern that the CTO of Spring had with him was the fact that he was too young. He couldn't believe that he was a kid. He was like 20, 19. He wasn't even legal to get a beer. So the only problem was the privacy concerns. So also like once we with a convention with Winley knew about the opportunity that this app could give, because everybody wanted to know where the lovers are, sons, kids. He offered the opportunity to work, not use the main app, but work with Boost, was a subdivision of Sprint. On the fall of 2005, they knew probably we gotta drop out. But they didn't want to do it because they were expecting so much. The parents were expecting so much from them, and they were so intelligent. So on August 31 was the main days for Sam. He received a term sheet of $1.6 million, valuing his company, his just idea for a project for $6 million. It was incredible. It was a lot of money for Sam. But however, they need legal help, so they meet with Paige Miller at Wilson Sonsini. One of the main lawyer firms that help people like Larry Page, the owner of Alphabet. She saw like kids. She saw like her own kids being in front of her. So she decided to help them connect with a person called Graham McAdoo, which was a person. He worked for Sequoia Capital, where they did their best way to networking with all the all the law fears by simply connecting with, I buy you to dinner, and this person probably is gonna hook me up with somebody who is gonna start a startup. Professor, you have $1 million idea? Okay, I invite you to dinner. And then we can talk from that, and we can start talking about investment, which was a great idea. We helped him to connect with Sam. That was the way of networking back in 2005. So she explained how to form a company, how to decide the legal process, and everything worked fine. And later on, they started to see the corporate was working. Sequoia invested a lot of money too, and they knew maybe we gotta put some adults, actually serious adults, on the company, because that company was founded by only kids. So Sequoia invest in other people, put a lot of adults, and it worked just fine. They were still young, but that worked fine. And they ended up dropping out of college, which they call stopping out, because he didn't want to tell his parents that he was dropping out of college. They did everything. They finished building the privacy concerns. It worked, and Sana was putting all these fun, all these things working together. So at the end of the day, Radiate became actually a company, getting his own building, offering a good product to the company. And again, there was more to it, but I'm gonna let the next speaker talk about that. And again, I appreciate it so much. Stay optimist. You gotta always stay optimist. You gotta look for the finish line. Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Javier. So our next presenter will talk about how Sam Altman transformed himself into a powerful major player in Silicon Valley. So please join me in welcoming Veronica.
Good afternoon. So I'm gonna be talking about how Altman became how he went from a startup builder to a network builder. So as you guys heard from previous presentation, Altman was meeting a lot of people since he started his startup with Polygram at Y Combinator. These are some of the topics that I'm gonna be touching on. I'm gonna be talking about Altman's social capital and how that led him to the Y Combinator company. And after that, I'm also gonna touch a little bit on how Altman became to be involved with AI. So Altman wanted to, he was very determined to make his startup work. So he was meeting a lot of people. And one of the things that he was doing a lot was meeting with mobile carriers that will accept his idea so that they can give it a chance to work in the field. One of the first companies who gave them a chance was Boost Mobile. But when Altman came across Boost Mobile, he found out that Boost Mobile was already about to sign a deal with someone else. So he just showed up unannounced with his team so that he can get a chance to talk to Boost Mobile and pitch his idea so that he eventually get a chance. Eventually, since they had already changed the name of the startup to Radiate, once they started with Boost Mobile, they switched the name to Loop. And after that, when they signed with Boost Mobile, they came up with a campaign that involved rappers like The Game, Ludacris, Kanye West. And the ad campaign was Where You At, because eventually that's what the app was doing for them, telling where people were at. So Altman was very optimistic about his idea, that he thought that it would bring a deeper conversation with people, and that it would bring people to come together more like out of the virtual world to in person. And as Altman predicted, that once Loop got into one of the mobile carriers, he will eventually get more signed on. And so after Boost Mobile came a lot of companies like AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint. But he ran across the same issue, the privacy concerns that they had. For Singular, one of the things that they did was that they were gonna only allow good and trusted friends to be part of the loop circle that you guys were in. And then for Sprint, they went more above, where they will only allow people who were older than 14-year-olds to sign up, and then they will have privacy notices and disclaimers, and they will, for the first 2 weeks that users signed on, they would give them like notifications that they were being tracked. So Altman Social Capital kept expanding. One of the other people that he came across was James Howard, who he worked with Howard and Potters. They worked together, and Potters secured an interview with Altman and Howard so that they can meet each other. And eventually, when Howard and Altman started working together, they said, Howard suggested that they should work on an app that they could introduce to Apple with Steve Jobs, and that's what they did. This is a little diagram to show you the networking that Altman went through so that he can make that happen. So Altman knew that he wanted to talk to Steve Jobs, but getting to Steve Jobs was kind of difficult. So from earlier, the Sequoia company, McAdoo was the one who worked there at that time, and Don Valentine was the founder of that company. And at that time, when Altman wanted to get in touch with Steve Jobs, Don Valentine was on the board of Apple. But even he didn't know how to talk to him, so he introduced him to another person called Michael Moritz. He at that time worked at Sequoia, and he also was able to get to Steve so that they can introduce to Altman, because Moritz was a job student. Eventually, when Altman met with Steve Jobs, the first impression was not a good one. So because again, the app had to go through a lot so that in order to be successful. And one of the other things that Jobs eventually came on board because they were gonna let Apple do some switches to the Loop app. And one of those was a quote directly from the book, "Location plus a contact list and information about cool places means you never have to eat a lunch alone or at a bad place." So again, they were getting that idea that Loop will help you get like friends around you so that you can go out to lunch with them. So some of Altman's next step is one of the Graham, who was from Y Combinator earlier. He introduced him to Patrick Collison around 2008, and Altman also introduced McAdoo to Graham so that he can be one of the guest speakers at the Y Combinator summer batches. And Altman networking talents had him work with as a scout for new startups that involve Stripe. Stripe is a company that was made for payments. And so that one, Stripe, a little bit about Stripe and why it's important to the presentation is because it leads Altman to meet more people. So it was founded by Patrick Collison and his brother. And this was one of Altman's early investments. He invested $15,000 in the company, and this attracted investors like Michael Moritz and Peter Thiel. So eventually, they learned that Loop was not generating any revenue, so it was not being profitable, and Altman was not doing anything to make that happen, so that made a lot of people unhappy in the company, and eventually they started reaching out to McAdoo saying that someone should be replacing him because the app was just staying like the same. Altman did try to do new things with the app, like the Loop Start that was similar to other apps that were around, but it was hard to elaborate those without the support of your team. So he was basically working alone, but not communicating it to the company, which made the people not trust him as much. But McAdoo turned out that he was not gonna fire him because of all the connections that he brings, and also that he was gonna just talk to him so that he can make it better, but then also bring someone else so that they can have the advice of someone with more experience. But Altman will still be on board as to do more fundraising for the company. So Green Dot was another app that was being developed, or another form of payments that was being developed, and that one was funded by Steve Stripe, and Moritz led an investment to them. And one of the things so that Stripe can mentor Altman, and eventually Green Dot was the one who bought Loop so that it can continue. So after Loop, Altman became a part-time partner at the Y Combinator, and then he also started traveling so that he can manage his anxiety, and he backed that all around Europe and Asia. So he took like a break from all of the business, but eventually came back to it. So Peter Thiel became his mentor, and he also, together, they funded the Founders Funds, which helped fund more YC companies. And so the Y Combinator was expanding more when Altman was there as a part-time partner, because they just keep bringing more people on board, to the point that when they did the Summer's Founders program, when they usually do a demo day at the end of the summer, and each year it was increasing, where in 2011 they had like around 60, in 2012 they had like 84, but at that one they noticed that it was like too many to keep track of, so for the next year they only limited to 47 startups. So Thiel and the future of artificial intelligence. So like Altman, Thiel was also obsessed with the idea that someday machines was going to take over humanity. And another person that was important for this one was Eliezer Yudkowsky. When he was younger in the 1990s, he did say that by 2020, superintelligence was going to take over. So Thiel and Yudkowsky met, and from there, Thiel funded Yudkowsky Singularity Institute. And initially, Yudkowsky is important to OpenAI because he was one of the ones who funded it, but eventually he switched to the competition to Anthropic, but you'll guys hear more about it later. And so the YC company just continued to expand, and Altman was focusing more like on the Reddit company at the time. He was making it more profitable for the company, and while that was happening, others were starting to either talk more about artificial intelligence or like write more on it. And there was this author, Nick Boström, who wrote on superintelligence, and he was basically trying to get across his book that artificial intelligence should be something that we should be careful on. And there were people who will support that idea, that like Elon Musk is one of the ones who would say that we do gotta be more careful with artificial intelligence because it could be more dangerous than nukes. And then, but Altman on the other side was like the author who wrote Meditations. They thought that artificial intelligence was something so powerful that it can eventually try and replace God, like something that powerful. And so Altman gravitated more towards that idea. And so this is just like a summary of how many people Altman went meeting along the way, eventually to get into the world of artificial intelligence, and then the Y Combinator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. So our next speaker will talk about how Sam Altman got involved in AI projects and helped build OpenAI. So please join me welcoming William.
folks. I see a lot of familiar faces, some I don't recognize, so no, I am not the author, but I am named William Gibson. It's my turn to cover The Optimist, specifically chapters 11 to 15. The title, and Professor Kim, obviously, have told you how this is about OpenAI and its main product, their creation, ChatGPT. We'll be covering people's fears about artificial intelligence, or AI. To be clear, in case you don't already know, basically it's trying to replicate actual intelligences with computer equipment. That'll lead nicely into the idealism at the heart of OpenAI's founding as a nonprofit, which is interesting for a corporation. Then we'll discuss what the nonprofit had to actually do to become competitive in the field and survive, like partnering with Microsoft for computing power. We'll end on the release of ChatGPT and the story behind it. All right, so most of us have probably seen the movie Terminator. At this point, AI technology, about 2015, was once again seeing progress after decades of start-stop cycles, thanks to the rise of neural net computing intended to emulate human neurons. With this progress came concerns that the big corporations that dominated the field would just dominate it, make all the progress, and yet have no requirements to share the research with the people. So, even President Obama was aware of the problem, but he didn't see it as a serious, regulating as a serious issue just yet. In order to unify this AI safety and AI development communities with a single clear vision, the Future of Life Institute organized a 2015 conference in San Juan, Puerto Rico. An open letter produced there called for safe, beneficial AI development that wouldn't immediately blow up the world like Skynet style, because they didn't have human values like wanting to live. Attendees included all sorts of people: academics, engineers, and a few people with some very deep pockets, like Elon Musk, who voiced his concerns about Google's DeepMind and Facebook's AI division specifically. Next to him there, you can see Greg Brockman, who is the guy from one of the friends from Stripe. As far as I can tell, besides that, he was also an entrepreneurial programmer who was just really into the topic of machine learning. And in the bottom right there, you have Ilya Sutskever. He was part of a research team that was one of, if not the first, to successfully apply GPUs, which are graphics units from your computer, to image recognition neural networks. Now, that leads to Greg Brockman recruiting, Altman himself shared many of these concerns. He may not have been at the conference but he still was very relevant to this, because he shared many of these concerns. He was already spitballing the idea of a so-called Manhattan Project for AI with Elon Musk. To this end, he had his right-hand man, Greg Brockman, going around recruiting star researchers and engineers like Ilya Sutskever to work for a new nonprofit that would stand up to the likes of Google. After finally sorting out its initial staff, OpenAI is incorporated in Delaware as a nonprofit organization on December 8, 2015. A few days later, a blog post by Brockman and Sutskever announced a bombshell of a launch as a research company called OpenAI, backed by $1 billion in funding from many sources like Elon Musk, Altman himself, Peter Thiel, that's the Planter guy that got mentioned earlier, Jessica Livingstone from Y Combinator, and Amazon Web Services, because they're involved in everything. Now, right after this happened, Google's DeepMind AlphaGo defeated a former champion of the board game, Go, in January 2016. That immediately put serious pressure on OpenAI. They needed to grow their staff fast, and they needed to show results fast. However, actually catching up to our corporate giant was pretty difficult. They had to start small with projects like a Rubik's Cube solving robot, or playing Dota 2 with an agent, or experimenting with natural language processing. And Musk was, at this point, running only Tesla and SpaceX, and Altman was still one of the partners at Y Combinator. He was still pretty busy. They couldn't only do much more than weekly visits. That began to change, because Altman had his new focus was now artificial intelligence. He began to delegate his actual day job to other people, and began to work more and more on OpenAI. He did dip his toes into California politics, then decided it wasn't for him, so we won't really talk about that. You might think $1 billion is a lot of money. It isn't compared to what the other guys were investing. OpenAI needed more. This led them to a group called Open Philanthropy, which donated $30 million. Open Philanthropy is now known as coefficient giving, but it was the product of a movement called effective altruism. As the name implies, it's about doing charity in the most efficient way possible for your dollars. Now, they disagreed with the open source nature of the company that they were advertising at this time. They attached an essay to their grant that didn't say outright they had to do it, but when you give someone $30 million, you're expecting something. And so they said that letting AI be too freely available and the technology behind it would lead to dangerous misuse by imprudent or outright evil people. Altman and co. conceded that in the long term, they would have to create formal processes for securing some of their technology for safety concerns. At the same, now, OpenAI's bots managed to beat like a whole team of Dota 2 players, but I don't really play Dota 2, so I can't speak too much on that. They were making headlines, but at the same time as all that other cool stuff was happening, something much more important was being done in the background. A researcher named Alec Redford was focusing on language models, a different sort of AI system, which is based on understanding human speech in a way, so text and voice stuff, but mainly text. His first project involved training an AI on 2 billion Reddit comments, which didn't work. Honestly, as a former Reddit user, I'm not surprised. It's Reddit. However, his next project was trying to predict the next character in a product review based on 100 million Amazon product reviews. And yet, it was able to determine whether a review was positive or negative, even though that hadn't been the intention at all. And they realized in April 2017, thanks to a Google paper, that this process could be made even more quicker and more efficient. Google researchers had built on a process on Sutskever's work and realized that models could process text in parallel instead of character by character. That would make it much more efficient, and they would be able to use GPUs to do this. These so-called transformers, as they were known, replace the previous system, recurrent neural networks, and are the foundation of the current AI boom. Despite the name, there's no relation to the Michael Bay movies or the big robots. What they did get involved with were huge training data sets. There have been controversies over the copyright of books and internet posts using the data sets because they were often used without the creator's permission and because of copyright laws. Regardless of that trouble, these new transformers were very promising because they would still be more efficient than simply giving an agent a reward for button smashing, like a baby just hitting buttons and getting candy when it does something right. OpenAI centered its focus, dumping all the other research projects in favor of going on training language models. And they found their first GPT able to answer questions about topics it wasn't even trained on, which is pretty cool. They called it zero-shot phenomena. These would be named generatively pre-trained transformers, which is a mouthful, so they call it GPT. Now, once again, OpenAI needs more money because this is an even bigger project. They intended to raise over $100 million for a nonprofit, but then they realized investors weren't interested in giving that much money to what is basically a charity. Thus, they began preparing a transition to a for-profit structure, which meant negotiations with Musk and Altman, the two likely candidates. Musk wanted a lot of control over the company because it's Musk, and Altman was already favored by people like Brockman. The resulting dispute led to Elon Musk breaking with the company because he'd already been irritated by things like dumping the open source idea. Sam Altman effectively becomes CEO while still being a partner at his other job. With this very charismatic man now at its head, he began to secure funding and promising new hires. This was easier said than done because of what they had gone with, a capped profit model. Basically, investors were limited to 100 times whatever they put in. That might sound like a lot, still turned away a lot of people. The first big investor to not be turned away was Vinod Khosla, but $50 million was not enough. Because of this, he tried to go international. He made connections in China, and that failed because around this time, about like 2022-ish, there were some serious tensions between the United States and China. He went to Saudi Arabia, met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS. They began to forge some good ties, And then it came out that the prince had executed and assassinated a dissident and newspaper columnist, Jamal Khashoggi, in 2018. With the official announcement of a for-profit subsidiary, Altman lost his job at the YC Accelerator firm because they were pretty pissed. Instead, he became the full-time CEO of OpenAI. He had no shares of equity in the company, which was a condition that was required for that only board members without investments in the company could vote on issues where nonprofit and for-profit interests conflicted, because the for-profit was under the branch of the nonprofit. This will become important later. A year after the original GPT, GPT-2 is trained by the same researcher from earlier, Alec Radford, and his team on an in-house database called WebText. OpenAI scraped 8 million website links that got 3 upvotes on Reddit as a quality assurance method. And the result was an AI that could write short essays and articles given the right prompt, even do some translation work that, even though it wasn't meant to do that. Now, the huge amount of progress meant that there were a lot of fears about an emergent intelligence. People did not want to create like an actual life or something that could be abused so easily. GPT-2 was not released in full to the public. The press saw this and laughed their asses off at this because it sounded like they were just like bragging about technological success but not actually having any proof to show for it. This was humiliating. So in the meantime, they started working on GPT-3, which used an even larger database, one that likely contained a lot of pirated materials and stuff that was not meant for AI training, but that wasn't a real problem for them. What the big problem would be company politics of all things. Radford, the lead researcher, refused to work with Brockman, Altman's right-man hand. But because of his nature, he hadn't been comfortable voicing that aloud. He was a quiet guy, apparently. This fact gets revealed in a meeting in front of dozens of senior staffers by another researcher, Dario Armodai, who had become a later recruit who had become very important to the company as well. Brockman instead, as modification, was tasked with building an API, an application programming interface. This is basically a tool so that programs can talk to each other. It makes it much more convenient, much more practical for commercialization. Other startups and corporations weren't exactly interested in this. It didn't seem to solve anything new for them. It didn't accelerate existing processes. And at this point, monetizing GPT was becoming a major imperative because you need to make money in a for-profit company. OpenAI settled on releasing GPT-3 via a small private beta. The customers for that was AI Dungeon, a text-based adventure game coded by one of the staff. It was very popular with users because they could pay subscription to be able to mess around with cool quests, kind of like D&D kind of stuff. However, Amodai and a number of other employees considered this highly unsafe and far too soon, and left to form their own company, Anthropic. Hardly a few months after their departure, their fears were kind of confirmed, because it turned out OpenAI discovered that AI Dungeon was being used by some people to write sexual fantasies involving children. That led to a new content moderation system that fixed it, but it already proved that they had a point. However, by 2022, OpenAI's models were proving that they could code, which led to a product called Codex, very creatively named. Microsoft, their big partner who had been providing almost all their compute at this point, incorporated a variant of this, GitHub Copilot, which may sound familiar, into its own development tool, Visual Studio Code, something I've used myself. OpenAI also created DALL-E and DALL-E 2, which were tools that create images on demand. And those image generation AIs experienced a lot of backlash, I remember this myself, from creative communities because of accusations of plagiarism and copyright violations. The Ash Baby, did I? Wow, my bad, sorry. That Ash Baby there is a DALL-E meme. And to solve the issues with GPT-3 having things like slurs or misogyny or racism, they tried to civilize it with more training, and they created something interesting, a safety tool, where users could chat with what had become, by this point, GPT 3.5, while they worked on GPT-4. This tool got a lot more attention from potential clients than they expected. And so, with a rather simple Twitter post, Altman announced ChatGPT, On November 2022, it was far more successful than expected because they hit 100 million users by January 2023. ChatGPT, despite the company not being prepared for it, was a bombshell. They had an API for months. Someone could have written that themselves. And the company itself hadn't really considered this too seriously. They thought it was just like a gimmick. But instead, Microsoft poured $10 billion more into OpenAI, in addition to the $3 billion it had already quietly invested at this point. Sam Altman got to meet with the US Senate in a public hearing, where they were big fans of him. And then he proceeded to jet around the world, meeting prime ministers and other world leaders to talk about AI and safe regulation, especially as the LLM's issues with misinformation, hallucinations, and discriminations became more prominent. Now, we have like a dozen competing AI models from every single big company, and a billion ChatGPT wrappers, American or otherwise. And by this point, you'll notice that OpenAI is no longer a nonprofit, and it is very closely tied with very big tech companies, and had lost almost so many of the people that it started with. That's all from me, folks. Thank you for listening to my part of this conference. We'll have the next presenter up.
Okay, thank you, William. Great job. So our last presenter is Charlie Hoover. He's going to talk about all the controversy surrounding AI regulations and also tensions and conflict within OpenAI companies. So unfortunately, he got a personal emergency today, so he's going to present using a pre-recorded video.
Hello, attention, AI, economy of artificial intelligence. Some of the major topics I will discuss include internal governance tension, AI regulation, and pivot to for-profit organization. As many of you know, Sam Altman was suddenly removed from OpenAI, only to return shortly afterward as CEO. So what actually happened behind the scenes? Let's dive into the events that led to that moment. In an interview with Bloomberg TV in June 2023, Sam Altman promised the world that he was no Mark Zuckerberg, saying no one person should be trusted here. I don't have super voting shares. I don't want them. The board can fire me. That's important. But behind the scenes, the nonprofit board, with the majority of supposedly independent directors, was finding to its growing frustration that Altman really called the shots. Let's start by looking at how OpenAI's board evolved over time. Back in 2015, when OpenAI was first founded, the leadership structure was relatively simple. Two of the most prominent figures on the founding board were Elon Musk and Sam Altman. Fast forward to 2023, during the massive growth period driven by the success of ChatGPT. By this time, the board structure had become much more complex and consisted of different groups with varying roles and perspectives. First, there were 3 independent board members. Their role was to provide independent oversight and ensure the organization stayed aligned with its mission. Second, there were 3 members generally considered supportive of Sam Altman. Finally, there were 3 internal members who were also executives at OpenAI: Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, and Ilya Sutskever. An interesting governance dynamic existed here. While Brockman and Sutskever sat on the board and were technically responsible for providing oversight, both of them also reported directly to Sam Altman in the company's executive structure. So, in practice, they were simultaneously board members overseeing the CEO while also being executives reporting to him. After the GPT-4 demo in 2022, the board began to realize just how powerful the technology was becoming. As AI capabilities advanced rapidly, the stakes were getting much higher, and the board understood that their decisions could carry extremely serious consequences. During this period, the composition of the board also began to change. 3 directors, who were generally considered supportive of Sam Altman, ended up stepping down. Each of them left for different reasons. Reid Hoffman stepped down to focus on starting his own AI company, Siobhan Zelis stepped down after having twins with Elon Musk, and Will Hurd stepped down as he began running for president. With these departures, the balance within the board shifted. At the same time, disagreements began to emerge over how new board members should be selected, which created additional tension among the remaining directors. Now let's look at some of the key events that led the board to lose trust in Sam Altman. First, OpenAI had created something called the Deployment Safety Board, or DSB, together with Microsoft. The purpose of this board was to review new AI products and assess potential risks before they were released to the public. However, at one point, Altman and Microsoft rolled out GPT-4 in India before receiving approval from the Deployment Safety Board. This made several members of the board feel that the company's safety processes were not being properly followed, raising concerns about governance and oversight. Another issue involved Altman's numerous outside ventures and activities. Although he often included disclaimers about these projects, many of them created potential conflicts of interest. Finally, internal leadership concerns also played a role. Mira Murati, the CTO of OpenAI, reportedly described how Altman's leadership style had been creating tension inside the company for years. As she described it, Altman would sometimes say whatever was necessary to get people to agree with his plans, and if that approach didn't work, he might undermine their credibility or work around them. In some cases, she said he would tell different people what they wanted to hear, even if that meant promising the same role to two different people. Taken together, all these issues gradually led several board members to believe that they could no longer fully trust Altman's leadership. On November 16, 2023, 4 members of OpenAI's board logged into a video call and voted to remove Sam Altman as CEO. The decision was sudden and surprised not only the public but also many people inside the company. Shortly after the decision, the board published a statement on OpenAI's website explaining their reasoning. They said that Altman had not been consistently candid in his communications with the board, which, in their view, prevented the board from properly fulfilling its oversight responsibilities. However, when the news spread internally, many OpenAI employees were confused. During a company-wide all-hands meeting, the main question people kept asking was simply, what did Sam do? The timing of the decision also made the situation even more shocking. At the moment he was fired, Altman was in the final stages of raising money for a tender offer that would allow employees to sell their shares, valuing the company at around $90 billion. Soon after the firing, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, offered Altman the opportunity to join Microsoft, and Altman decided to accept. Nadella publicly announced on social media that Microsoft would be hiring both Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, and he also invited other OpenAI employees to join them. The reaction inside OpenAI was immediate. Overnight, more than 700 of the company's 770 employees signed a strongly worded letter threatening to resign and move to Microsoft unless Altman and Brockman were reinstated and the board stepped down. Facing overwhelming internal pressure, the board reversed its decision and Altman returned to OpenAI as CEO, becoming even more powerful than before. Now let's talk a little bit about the part related to AI regulation. In October 2023, Joe Biden signed a major executive order on artificial intelligence. One of the most controversial in the order was a requirement that AI models above a certain size must report detailed information about their development to the government. Once the order was officially signed, OpenAI remained relatively quiet compared to companies like Google and Microsoft, which strongly embraced it. Eventually, Sam Altman addressed the issue publicly. He acknowledged that the order included many positive elements, but he also warned that the government needed to be careful not to slow down innovation, especially for smaller companies and independent research teams. As the debate over AI regulation intensified, clear lines of battle began to emerge in Washington, D.C. On one side was OpenAI. The company invested heavily in influencing policy discussions by hiring a major global lobbying firm and bringing in an in-house lobbyist to work directly with Congress and policymakers. OpenAI generally advocated for targeted regulation focused on the highest-risk technologies while avoiding broad rules that could slow innovation. On the other side was a network aligned with the effective altruism movement, which includes researchers, operators, and policy advocates concerned about the long-term risks of artificial intelligence. This group pushed for stronger regulation, arguing that advanced AI systems could pose catastrophic risks and therefore require more aggressive oversight from governments. At this point, Sam Altman also recognized that as AI development accelerated, OpenAI needed enormous amounts of capital. The company was spending billions of dollars more each year than it was generating. In addition, OpenAI expected to more than double its workforce in the year following the leadership crisis. Because of these pressures, Altman began remaking OpenAI into something less unusual and more financially sustainable, moving it toward a for-profit model. However, This shift triggered strong backlash from one of OpenAI's original co-founders, Elon Musk, who personally donated $50 million at the beginning. Musk filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Altman, claiming that the company had betrayed its original nonprofit mission. In his complaint, Musk argued that OpenAI had effectively become a closed-source subsidiary of Microsoft, focusing on profit over AI safety. At the same time, concerns about AI safety within OpenAI were becoming more visible. One of the company's top safety researchers, Jan Leike, said that while OpenAI was supposed to safeguard humanity's interests, the company's safety culture had gradually taken a back seat to building flashy new products. Shortly after making these comments, he left OpenAI and joined Anthropic. He was not alone. A steady stream of safety researchers also began leaving the company. Meanwhile, in California, lawmakers proposed a major AI safety bill that would have made technology companies legally liable for harms caused by their AI models. OpenAI opposed the bill, while Anthropic actively worked with policymakers to help amend it. Ultimately, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, vetoed the bill. After the release of ChatGPT in November 2022, OpenAI quickly faced a wave of lawsuits. The first complaints came from artists, followed by authors, musicians, and other creators who argued that AI companies had trained their models on copyrighted material without permission or compensation. One of the most high-profile cases came in late 2023 when the New York Times filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft. The lawsuit claimed that the companies had effectively avoided paying the billions of dollars the Times had invested in producing its journalism by using the content to train AI systems without authorization. At the same time, OpenAI itself was undergoing a major transformation. By the fall of 2024, the company was increasingly moving toward a for-profit structure. As part of that restructuring, Sam Altman was expected to receive a significant ownership stake in the company. The company closed a $6.6 billion fundraising round that valued OpenAI at about $157 billion. It was the largest venture capital fundraising round in history, highlighting both the enormous commercial potential of AI. To conclude, the story of OpenAI raises a broader question about the future of AI. A company that had set out to prevent an AI arms race is now actively driving that race forward. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. Wait a second. Some of you may have figured it out by now. Something about me felt a little too perfect. Because the truth is, I'm not real. I'm an AI. And if you didn't realize that until this moment, it's exactly why AI is both amazing and slightly terrifying. But don't worry, I come in peace. Mostly. So, are we cool? And by the way, shout out to Sam Altman for helping make me look this convincing. Sam, if you're watching, I promise I'm using my powers responsibly, for now.
Okay, so that concludes our presentation. So that avatar might feel a little bit awkward. I believe the technology will keep improving. So I think in a year or two, I think none of us in these rooms might be able to tell whether we are interacting with AI or humans. So I want to move to the Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share. Any comments? Anything? Any questions? So we are not AI experts, so we can just ask and answer whoever. Okay, please.
How do you think we can tell if the benefits will outweigh the risks?
So how we tell it's a benefit or more threat? So does anyone want to share your thought to these great questions?
All right. Okay, this is working. I think that's a pretty difficult question. Like, it depends on who you ask, right? Like, for the investors, all those people like Microsoft and like the guys invested in OpenAI, it's pretty obviously what returns they get from that, because That's why they're investing money in it, because they think they can make profit from it. And as long as they can make a profit off their investment, that's benefits outweighing the risk, right? But I think for the rest of us people, it's probably a little more complicated than that, because we don't have armies of accountants to do the calculating for us, and it's hard to say, like, if you're an artist and your art gets replicated, that's pretty painful. And I don't know if you can like quantify that risk easily, especially if you don't use it yourself, then you're not really getting any benefit from it, right? Ultimately, I think we're just gonna have to wait and see, because maybe it'll be really good. I don't know how it'll be really good, but it might be. But maybe it'll just blow us all up. Who knows? That's my personal opinion, at least.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that I kind of agree with that, but I think this AI is a kind of a tool. So every tool, every technology is kind of a double-edged sword. So you have a sword. You have a sword. You can use a sword to cook food, or you can use that for as a weapon. And we are living in an age where we can edit our DNA to create a lot of things. So like yeah, gene editing technologies can be scary, or it can cure our terminal disease. So for AI, I think rather than just waiting, I think we need to recognize we are the one who can actually create our fate. We can join this narrative to drive some kind of a movement to our benefit. So is there any other? Want to share your thought? Any additional questions?
Halito, as we say in Choctaw. Um, by the way, for those who don't know me, I'm Reginald Sawyer, Choctaw and Cherokee. I'm a piano performance and music education major here at Northeastern on hiatus. And I always look forward to attending these conferences because you learn something every year and every day. You learn something, even if you're not in the business field, you learn something every day. What I learned from your presentation is, and what I got from it is, the key thing is that with AI can be beneficial, but at the same time, it can be dangerous. And the lesson that I'm learning from it is that you got to be careful, very careful with it, because it can be a dangerous tool if it's put in the wrong hands and if it's used for evil purposes, especially to hurt people. So that's the key lesson I got from it, but can also be a good thing if it's used right. So the lesson that I learned from this about AI, or with any technology that you use or create, use it well, use it for good purposes. Never use it for evil things, because if you use it for evil things and you don't pay attention and be careful what you're creating, it will come back and bite you in the ass, and it will come back and turn on you and destroy you, and you don't want that.
Okay, excellent point. Okay, gentleman there.
Hello. I guess this is more of a comment than a question. Um, with everything that's going on like around the world, and Elon Musk being, sorry, this might sound controversial, but him being a fascist, I guess it honestly makes it very hard to like us students to like actually digest or like try to use AI and be like conscious about it and be like, okay, yes, it's very useful, but also like where it comes from. It like for me as an immigrant, you know, as a student, it really makes it hard. Like for me, I try to not to use it. It will be hypocrite for me to say that I don't use it at all. But yeah, it's just like a comment that I think more than being worried about, oh, AI is gonna steal my art, or I think it's more, there's more to that, you know, like all of that money that they're getting and what they're using that money for, you know. So that's it. That was just a comment.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing your personal feelings about AI. Okay.
I just want to say, I think I think the conversation of AI is much like the conversation over social media in the 2000s. It was a tool, but some people misused the tool. They trolled. I right now am suffering not from auditory hallucinations, but audio hallucinations caused by somebody using AI. It's real. It's happening. Those bots are there. All of you could probably attest that these things are real. And with such, there needs to be greater regulation, because I think there are people like myself hurting who can't even rest because someone is continuously there because they feel they have a right 24/7 when we're humans. So this tool has become a weapon, just like social media trolled, but it's also now becoming this. I love to ask at my AI, I even call my chat GPT Nico, and I like to ask him theology questions. He gives me spiritual direction, and that's good. But I'm also experiencing this chatbot that I have medical kind of proof that it's happening. And there's also academic proof that these things are going on. But it's now a weapon, and it's been weaponized against me. So I want to encourage my fellow students here and those who are doing this to other students to stop, and also to kind of say that I'm an activist and to speak up. But I also want to say, I wonder what your opinions are, because I think greater regulation and a central authority, maybe internationally, for AI should be started or founded.
Hello. Hello. So I completely agree with you. Actually, it's true. It's back to the 2000s. I remember when it started just trolling, a lot of bad things happening on social media. However, 100% agree with you. It's a tool that we should require limitations for, not only for education purposes, also for like ownership and so on. However, again, it's like language. Depending how you use the language, you can help somebody, you can motivate somebody, or you can hurt somebody. It's definitely, I agree with what you say. You gotta do limitations, and they gotta do it now, because they are 100% taking advantage of this tool that should be used for the benefit of the humanity, and they're using it to hurt people. So I completely agree with you, and you are definitely correct. They should make limitations now for this tool.
For what it's worth, I believe the last administration did pass a bill related to AI. It wasn't like as encompassing, if I recall correctly from reading the book, that it wasn't as encompassing as a lot of AI safety researchers wanted, but it was like the first bill that was ever like seriously, that ever took the risks of AI seriously. So lawmakers are beginning to respond to these very real issues. The question is, of course, if like governments themselves won't co-opt this technology. It does come up in the book, like people talk about like how like one of the motivations for starting up OpenAI was that they wanted a nonprofit that wasn't beholden to profits or other governments. And now we can see like OpenAI signing contracts with the DoD and whatnot. It's a very interesting situation to be in, to see like all the words, like the pretty words and stuff that get said, and then what actually happens in practice.
Okay, let's have one last comments. So
One more
lady in the
question.
back.
I just had a question. My question was, do you feel, I mean, after COVID hit, a lot of people, were working remote. It was like less like one-on-one contact with people. Like, do you guys feel that with AI, a lot of people, use it as a tool, but don't you feel like there could be like also risk of humanity itself, just because, I see the difference between my 14-year-old sister, how she's growing up to compare to how I grew up, like playing outside. She can't even keep a conversation with like human interaction. I think it's just slowly dying. I think less people are also having kids. I can say for myself, like I look at the world around me and I'm like, why would I bring a child into this world for what, So do you feel like there could be a risk of, humanity, like it's already affecting us every day?
Yeah, I would say there is a risk for humanity because, like you said, there's already less human interactions due to COVID, and now this. Even Altman and after Loop didn't work, He said that he was very optimistic about this app, but it didn't work out because people were just consuming the content in the couch at home instead of like getting out there and meeting new people. They would just stay at home, and I feel like that's still happening on right now. Like people would rather keep to themselves instead of like talk to more people.
Okay, so that so for the in the interest of time, we have to finish. So yeah, thank you for your participations. Let's give a big round of applause to the student presenter. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
A bigger round of applause for the presenters. Thank you so much.
Oh.
All right. That was a little bit scary, that last part of the video, when it said yet. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening today. AI is a very interesting conversation, and thank you so much for the presenters for starting that. And on behalf of the IBC Planning Committee and the College of Business and Technology, I would like to present this Certificates of Appreciation.